Good
Bojack.
morning, everyone. I'm Terry Wilkerson, the Diversity Inclusion Coordinator for UCAN. Welcome to the Black Women's Leadership Brunch, the Bring Your Own Brunch edition. I hope you all have gotten you something to eat. I know I'm waiting on my order from Pearl's Place, and I'm a West Sider, so you know it must be good if I'm going to the South Side. So I just want to thank you all for joining us on this beautiful Juneteenth. It only feels right that we celebrate the excellence of Black women in leadership on a day that marks when General Gordon Granger rode into Texas with news that the still enslaved were now free. This was actually 2 years after Lincoln had entered into the Emancipation Proclamation declaring the freedom for all slaves. 1 year later, the members of St. Paul's UCC would commit to caring for children who had lost their fathers in the war. With a generous donation from Mr. and Mrs. Carl Ulick Evangelical Lutheran Orphan Asylum, now known as UCAN, will be established. So today feels special for like a multitude of reasons. It's Juneteenth, it's Pride Month, the world is in full revolution, and we're all gathered here today to celebrate the emergence and perseverance of our leadership, particularly that of Black women in leadership. And we have a very esteemed panel who definitely gives women everywhere something to aspire to. And while we celebrate the esteem today, I want us to not to forget to uplift the often dismissed and voiceless. So that includes Black women who don't have degrees, Black women who are incarcerated, Black women who suffer from opioid addiction, Black women who don't have edges, and Black trans women. All of those different types of women matter. And so I know you did not log in so that you can see and hear me. I'm gonna turn it over to our wonderful moderator for the day. Robin Robinson is a long-term friend of UCAN. You've probably seen her hosting our signature Youth Leadership Award event. If you are lucky, you grew up with Robin on your television screen. So with that being said, no further ado, Robin Robinson, our moderator for today.
Thank you so much, Terry. A long-term friend of UCAN. Have you all noticed how once you get involved with UCAN, they never let you go? All right, so there's no like passing friendships with this organization because they do such great work. So this leadership brunch is something that I'm only recently introduced to, but they've been doing it for a while, and I love the concept. It just so happens that this year it falls on Juneteenth. I have an amazing group of women here. Last year I knew most of the panelists. This year I've been introduced to a bunch of new power, which is a great thing because you're maybe meeting some people that are doing things you didn't know were being done by Black women, and can be inspired. And we're going to take your questions. We want to know, before I introduce my panelists, right, and you all should have access to the bios, unless you're on your car, on your phone in your car, and that's cool too. So we're going to try to paint a picture for you if you aren't able to actually join us live on Facebook or on the Zoom call. But we want to kind of we want to take the temperature of the virtual room, so to speak. So we have a couple of polls that we want you all to work on, and we're gonna, I'm going to be introducing my panelists while you take those polls so that we can make the best use of our time. They're real simple. First of all, we're gonna wanna know where you are in your journey. We can call it a career journey, but I want to really expand the definition of career. I honor those whose careers are in the home. I honor those whose careers are not paid. I honor those whose careers are, still in their head. Whatever your life's passion is, whatever you spend most of your time doing. Are you just starting? And that has nothing to do with age. Okay. Are you just starting? Are you in the middle of it? Are you, are you a veteran? And so that we can kind of gear, our collective wisdom toward, if it turns out that everybody on here is a veteran, then we're going to talk about what's your next chapter? How do you rewire? We don't call it retire anymore. The second poll question, and I'm going to put them up back to back, and we'll reveal the poll answers later on in our virtual cast, is going to be about the times that we're in right now, this kind of global awakening of the fact that Black lives have not mattered. I don't know about you all, but my phone's ringing off the hook, oh, I had no idea, what can I do? I'm sorry, etc. And and there are tangible things that have happened that would have ordinarily taken a long time and a task force and a federal law. I mean, how many of you are off today? Suddenly, Juneteenth is your corporate holiday. So the second poll is about, do you think this is going to sustain? Is this going to be the time that it takes? Is this going to be the time that we got a wake-up call and didn't hit the snooze button? So it's kind of like how you feel this is going to work out for us, for Black people. I'm being very intentional here. I know that it's a little politically correct to say people of color, Black and brown. I'm talking about Black people and Black people only. All right. So African-American specifically, so unapologetically. So we want to give you a chance that those polls should be launched. Are they launched? Okay. Terry, give me a raised hand or something. Okay. Meanwhile, let's meet our panelists, because I believe you're seeing them all. And it's very hard to sit there and try to look cute while people are talking. So I want to introduce them. Let's begin with Kim Casey. Kimberly is the Chief Program Officer for UCAN. She brings agency-wide lens to planning, execution, integration, and success of programs and services. And those of you who are familiar with the programs and services of UCAN know this is a big basket that she carries. She used to be the Director of Grant Making Strategy and Engagement at Forefront, where she did similar work implementing action plans around specific industry, social issues, and philanthropic and nonprofit leaders, setting their collective direction for programs and community impact. So she's been doing the work through those who have the intention of raising us up. She's a key contributor to organizations that strive towards social development, justice, and community service. So when we talk about the times that we're in, right, she's in the middle of trying to create equity for people that have not had it, not collectively. And that's been her mission, her career, her life's passion. Deirdre Drake is an executive vice president and a chief human resources officer. And you all know what that means. That means that, she makes sure that the hiring goes right. She leads the human resources organization for her organization, and for solutions that directly enable the achievement of U.S. cellular strategic objectives. She started her career in human services in 1989 with Marathon Oil Company. She's had increasingly senior leadership positions, in other words, up, within the field of human resources with Kraft Foods, Aramark Corporation, Bank of Montreal Financial Group. She used to be the managing director and chief human resources officer for the Bank of Montreal Financial Group's capital market division. And next, and I'm not reading the whole bio, guys, because if you don't have them there where you can look at them, audience, they will be up on Facebook and on UCAN's website for you if you want to go back and find out more about the women that you heard from today. And Kathy April Rush is, as President, Diversity Alliance for Science, she's responsible for directing and controlling organizational activities, building partnerships, and developing strategic alliances. She sits on the various boards and councils that advocate diverse supplier interests. I hate to say she's kind of geeky, right? She's in the whole science field. She's also a published essay author and has been highlighted in Diversity Plus magazine as one of 25 champions of diversity and featured in Heart and Soul magazine's Women of Substance in Healthcare. She holds a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. I don't know what that means, but it sounds really impressive. And an MBA from Dominican University. And she's a native of Chicago, raised on the South Side. Giselle Marcus is from New York, raised in Harlem, as she calls it, the old Harlem. She's a TEDx speaker on the topic of networking, and she is the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Empower, which is a networking app that's going to launch in October. It sounds fascinating. She can't tell us too much about it because, things are in development, those tech secrets. She's passionate about the population of youth that UCAN serves. She was on the auxiliary board of UCAN, served as a mentor to girls collectively, that's that collective mentorship, for a decade. She loves to travel internationally. Her favorite continent is Africa, where she has explored 11 countries. She has an MBA from Harvard Business School and is an operations executive. She makes organizations hum. She has been entrenched in turning around departments, divisions, and entire organizations organizations with up to $800 million in revenue while improving their performance and enhancing operational efficiency. All of them are like, make me think, what have I been doing with my life? Okay. Cause you guys, you're a bunch of overachievers for sure. So just so that people could that kind of tells them what you do, to give them an idea of what they can't see on your resume or what's behind the lovely package that you present. People look at you and they make decisions about, who you are, what you think, what you do, what you'd like, without seeing inside the package. So I'm going to start with just a little check-in, and I'm going to ask you, tell me if you have a nickname, tell me what your nickname is. And I'm going to ask you what someone might not be able to tell about you just by looking at you. Keep it lean, right? So, but just tell me what they might, I can model that for you, okay? So my name is Robin. I have no nicknames. If you call me Robbie or Rob, I will not answer. You may not be able to know by looking at me that I am, and I do this all for people who've been on UCAN's webinars before. They're gonna say, here she goes again, but it's the truth. The fact of the matter is, I will whoop that tail on the bid whist table. Okay, so I'm gonna call you out, Giselle.
So I'm called G by as a nickname.
Wait a minute.
Can't hear you.
Hold on.
I've been called G, my initial
Nope.
first name.
I still can't hear you. I want you to work on your audio or offline a little bit. Let's see, and we'll go to Kathy while we see if we can. I don't know how to get you in a separate room to work on that, but that we heard you fine before we went live. Isn't that the truth? Okay, so that's how it goes. Okay, Kathy.
Okay. My male friends have a tendency to call me Cat. But other than that, I don't have a nickname. I won't answer to April because that's my last name, my maiden name. So I usually call people out on that. And what you cannot tell by looking at me, I love a good flea market. DuPage County, Lake County, Cook County, the state of California, love a good flea market.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly.
Let's see. My nickname would be, college friends and sisters call me Captain. So that probably tell you a little bit about my personality. And then what people might not know about me.
Just by looking.
Not by looking at me, is that I cook Southern food. So things like raccoons, frogs, those kinds of things.
Wow. I see a restaurant there in your future. Tiffany, good morning.
Good morning. So my nickname is Goose. Goose. I know. My father, since I was about 10 years old, gave me the nickname. I have no idea why. I couldn't even tell you why, but he calls me Goose and still does at 52. And you said what people don't know about me?
By looking at you.
I'm a lover of foreign languages. My degree is in Spanish. I studied Spanish and French in high school. I studied Spanish in college and lived overseas in Santander, Spain. And languages come easily, very easy to me, and they always have.
I love that. And I would not have known, and I'm jealous. I suffer from monolinguistic disease, right? I can only speak the one and not that one so well. All right, Giselle, you got out and got back in. Get that audio straight.
Hopefully, can you hear me okay?
Much better.
Excellent. So some of my really close friends call me G, which is the letter of my first name. And what you don't know about me by looking at me, and no one is allowed to laugh, I, at the same age as Tiffany, cannot ride a bike. So this woman who has been to Harvard Business School and 11 countries in South Africa can't ride a bike. And the reason I can't ride a bike, you'll find interesting. I grew up in Harlem. We lived when my parents separated, my mom and I lived with my grandmother in what was called then a tenement building. And It was a walk up. We lived on the 5th floor. So my mother brought me a bike and it had training wheels. So the thought was I'd learn how to ride on the training wheels. We take the training wheels off. I'd be riding today. Challenge became who, after working all week, wants to carry a bike up and down 5 flights of stairs. So before you knew it, I got too big for it. And then when my mother and I moved from my grandmother's home, I was in high school. So then I was just too embarrassed to get out there and learn how to ride and watch others see me learning. So,
okay. We can fix that. All right. You can still learn that. All right. Thank you very much, ladies. So I would like to kind of get right into what, not the elephant in the room. It is the room. It is the foundational conversation going on right now. And not, we used to say in the city, in the country, how about globally, which is this sudden for some people, not for us, awareness that Black lives have not mattered, at least by any evidence that we could measure, right? What has this meant for you in your roles, either within your organizations, within your corporation, within your circle of friends? Where do you see your leadership in this space and time right now, as we try to see if this is going to be the time when things actually shift for African Americans? And I'm going to let you volunteer to answer that, and not go in any particular. Who wants to?
So I would say that I feel my role is what my play dad has always told me: be who you are wherever you are. So I am, a Black girl from Harlem, and I am still that person. So what I feel my role is the organizations that I work within to hold them accountable. And there are things you can actually see that aren't right. So the questions around, what does our executive leadership team look like? What does our corporate board look like? What are the numbers of the people that look like us? How are we funding our affinity network groups? Because oftentimes they run on $0 and we're supposed to just figure it out. Want to see, what are we doing about community outreach? What are we doing around paid leave guidelines and children assistance? Because oftentimes that's something that we and other colleagues of ours need. And last but not least, what do our health plans look like physically as well as for our mental health? What is being done? And I think that it's our role to raise those questions in our workplaces, because if not us, who?
Did anybody's workplace make today a holiday all of a sudden?
Yes, they did. And Robin, I'll go next. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little liberty with your question. You said sort of how has our role changed? I think what's interesting is that a lot of African Americans have become the de facto expert in their sphere of influence, whatever their circle is. And for some of us, it's the workplace. For others, it's, organizations, it's neighborhoods, and I find it interesting. We went out the other night for a bike ride, and we got some smiles that I thought were like, overly kind of like, hey, we see you. But, more broadly, I think right now that, America's sort of in a state of flux, and to use an analogy, that 1971 Gil Scott-Heron classic, this is the opposite of that. The revolution is being televised. And so I think, for some of us, that, the term land of the free, home of the brave, for some of us, it's just phraseology, right? Because everybody doesn't feel free. And Black folks are scared, to leave their house for fear of their lives, or you scare your brother or your husband or your uncle or whomever. And so I think that, what happened 4 weeks ago, and how the conversations got started, they got started. And so I think, we're seeing obviously a lot of statements come out, corporate statements, nonprofit, retail. There's a lot of that happening. We've seen significant monetary movement, which I think is good. They're going to social economic programs, education, job training, entrepreneurship, and all of that is a start. And, you know, Lord willing, we will all be around to see whether or not this was live or Memorex years from now.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw that a sign that a young protester was carrying that said, "George Floyd is not a wake-up call. We've been trying to wake you up. And you just keep hitting the snooze button," right? So, and you know, that's absolutely true. So, Tiffany Johnson, I realize that I failed to introduce you. I have a technical difficulty in that, though I know I have your bio, I don't have it at the ready. So I know that you are the new boss of
Chicago United.
And Chicago United is a 52-year-old organization, which means that they started during the last wake-up call. Okay, so I think your perspective on, you know, what this is and if it is this the one, would be really, really good to have.
So I don't even know where to start, but this is my 8th week in the job.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, 8th week. So God has a funny sense of humor, right? Because I'm coming into an organization that was started like almost a year after I was born in '67, after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And the corporate community came together with, you know, the Chicago community to create Chicago United. And how I kind of describe it is we advance multiracial leadership in corporate America in 3 areas: boards, executive level management, and minority businesses. So coming in 8 weeks, and you know, you were asking kind of what my role is. I see myself as a disruptor. I always have been in every role that I've been in. When I've been one of the only, which has been mainly because I started off in commercial real estate, or when I've been with many. And so moving through this organization now, I'm really just, I'm in this space of what Giselle said, they hired me to be my authentic self. And here's who I am. And my role is to hold them accountable. So we are taking Chicago United to another level. So this is an opportunity, you know, as a Black woman to, I grew up in this, I understand this, here's my experience, and how does this experience, how can it move this organization along, is kind of what I'm there to do. And so unapologetically. And so it's an exciting time. I believe we're in a time where there's a lot of pain. One of my friends, Constance Jones, you guys know her she's the CEO of No Wall Charter Network. She said something on Facebook. She said, leading while grieving. And that has spoken to me over these last few weeks, because it's not just, yes, it's the social injustice and the pandemic, and we're at this tipping point, we've got this inflection point, and I feel like I've been leading while grieving. But at the end of the day, you know, as we do as Black women, you get up and you push through. And so that's what I'm doing.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting because when you're with an organization that is its mission anyway, right? So this it's almost like, you know, someone gave you a curtain call, said let's.
Yes.
You're
tons of questions. Where should we go? And I'm being honest. I don't have the answer right now. It's uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable. It took us how many hundreds of years to get in this? It's not going to just take a statement to get out. So that's like what I have to push through with everybody, right? It has to be actionable this time. But I do believe that I'm hopeful.
Right. We needed to get down to from the treetops to the grassroots. Some very interesting comments on the chat about the Gil Scott-Heron, who is my absolute favorite. And I felt like lately we have been in winter in America, right? She says that Gil Scott-Heron referenced that the revolution will not be televised because the revolution starts within. And don't forget that the last line of that is the revolution will put you in the driver's seat. So that's my favorite. That's one of my favorite parts of that. But he was a prophet and a poet, and you know, there's always been music that's kept us afloat even when it seemed like we were supposed to be out of here. Kim Casey from UCAN, and UCAN of course does work around equity all the time as well. Oftentimes bringing people from, you know, not just far behind the finish line, not even on the field, right? They are at risk of completely losing everything due to the inequities that they have faced generationally. You're already leading, right? How does it change in this time?
I think I want to say that coming to UCAN has allowed me to bring in my full self, in that this has been my passion work all of these years, and it's finally a job, right? So a lot of times our passions and jobs don't line up.
Right.
And I think being able to be in a space where we're saying we're working with youth and families that that the state, that the other organizations, that communities, that just systemic racism has created conditions for them that they can't get out of by themselves. And it goes back to that old adage that, you know, that people overuse, and that is that it takes a village. One of the things that I'm looking at in this particular time is because Claude Robinson at UCAN leads on our DEI effort. And because I have DEI as a background, I don't have to have it as a job. So I can come into the meeting and support him. I can come into the meeting and throw something on the table that people wouldn't expect to come from me, because diversity is not my function at UCAN. And I think that is the interesting crossroads that I think a lot of nonprofit leaders are going to have to grapple with, is not only are you just leading, but you have to think through the diversity component, whether it's the governance, whether it's the talent pipeline, or whether it's supplier diversity. And then now what I'm saying is we can't move anything in this country unless we begin with ourselves first, going back to your Gil Scott Heron, the revolution starts within, right? Because right now, I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and I've seen fits and starts, fits and starts, and fits and starts. And so now that I'm seeing all these people take a knee and raise a fist, I'm real skeptical right now. And the reason I'm really skeptical is because we can do a show. We can do this and say, look at the hands, while something else is happening over here. And I think the reason I'm skeptical is because we're asking white people to wake up and dismantle a system of which they receive unearned privileges. So that's just like me going to get a Pepsi out of the Pepsi machine that costs $2, and I put a quarter in and I get the Pepsi out. Am I going to go tell somebody to fix that machine? So, I mean, I'm just using that as a light example, but I'm really skeptical. But I'm going to add one thing to that, that I am hopeful still. So I've got a 15-year-old son who I'm raising in Inglewood, who I did a conversation with last week or 2 weeks ago during the YLA reception rooms before we went into YLA. And he talked about, now this is what he's doing on his own, personal research around police use of force across the country. And my husband said, why are you doing that? And he said, well, if I learn about it, I can tell others about it. Mm-hmm. And then after we did the program, after we did the Zoom room, he said, Mom, that wasn't so bad. I think I can do this again. I said, awesome. He said, but only for white people. And so I think that that's what's making me hopeful, is that we've got young people that are saying, hey, we see where the problem lies, and we really want to deal with that first before we start like putting up these statements and power fists and taking a knee. So.
Yeah, young people are definitely, they are leading, and they are grieving, and that with a mixture of rage as well. So when you talk about, we're asking people that have benefited from a system to change the system so they don't have that unfair advantage any longer, I think that the level of discomfort right now being created, i.e. you can no longer take for granted your safety and peace, privileged mm-hmm. person, right? With first the virus mm-hmm. that you're not in control, and then came this, right? So maybe it is kind of that perfect storm. I want to see if we can get the results of the poll to see how our listeners and viewers and audience are feeling about that. Do we have the results of the poll, Nicole?
The polls did not activate.
The polls did not activate. So, technology is not my friend. So that's okay. All right. So I'm not surprised, but that's all right. So, however you're feeling in this moment, hopefully some of what we have to say today will help you to decide a direction and how you, because everybody's a hummingbird, right? 1,000, maybe 1 million hummingbirds could put out a forest fire if they all carry a beak full of water. So into your career trajectory and thinking about African American women in particular, is there something that has presented a maybe repetitive obstacle to you? We always say we get in our own way. Maybe it's something about what you tend to do, or maybe it's something that you always seem to run into in corporate America or in Black America that you have had to strategize about overcoming. Anybody want to talk about a challenge that seemed to be either recurring or a particular issue for you?
So Robin, you said a particular that's sort of been repetitive over time, the challenge that we've had. So one of them for me, and I can recall this started, probably back, 15, 20 years ago. And it has seemed to repeated itself over time, is that feedback that you're a little too direct. Come on, a little strong. What is it? And there's laughter. People have probably heard this before. And what I see as assertiveness and adding my voice to a topic, because that's what I've been paid to do over the years in the organizations that I've been a part of. But and I remember a Black man giving me this feedback because a non-Black person went to complain about me, and he trying to help relations, and he said, well, maybe the next time, Kathy, when you go talk to her, you don't have to wear your beads. Like, don't come in every day with your beads. And I'm going, what are you talking about? And he says, and I said, you mean pearls? Why do I need to take my pearls off? But it was just trying to give the analogy and trying to explain to me what other people were feeling. Then I had an African-American woman senior leader trying to help me sort of say the same thing. Kathy, you got to give the people a little bit. You come in, you're all business, you got to give them a little water cooler. And I never could find, why was it necessary to sort of share all of my personal business with people? And she said, you just gotta, talk about bowling, talk about something, so that they can know you a little bit better. But it seems that has kind of followed me. I think the difference now is that, I'm acutely aware of it. Like I know it all, that tape is running all the time in the back of my head. But quite frankly, when I first started out professionally and I would get that feedback, I would think, well, maybe I went to an HBCU. So, they taught you to be bold. So, but it has sort of followed me, but now the tape is on and, I can adjust for the audience.
I'm not even sure
if
that's
needed.
Yeah. We have to wonder if that's what we need to do. Anybody else face a challenge that you think you faced because you were a Black woman?
I would say something that I've seen in myself and I've seen in others is that we have to be our own sister keeper. There are challenges that we run up against in the workplace that oftentimes are not our fault, but sometimes we may become the fall person for that. And while you're in the position, everybody's loving you, everybody wants to be with you, everybody wants to take you to lunch, take you to dinner, take you to cocktails. But let something go down and it not be, not look well on the outside. Oftentimes that sister gets forgotten, and we need not to do that to each other. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. I have a girlfriend who unfortunately went to federal prison. Some of you may know her. I'm not going to say her name. She's out now, which is great. But my point is, she was someone who was very well known, very well esteemed in social circles of brown women. And when this thing happened, all of a sudden, these people fall by the wayside. They're nowhere to be found. And I found myself just there, supporting her, and which now after her half-year journey in prison, her family, et cetera, has thanked me for what I've done, but I haven't done anything that she wouldn't have done for me. And a similar situation here in St. Louis, a friend of mine worked for the mayor, and political thing went down, wasn't her fault. She had to step down, she got a package, etc. But again, she was kind of put on this blacklist by people that look like us. And that is just not so cool. So we just really need, when we see that, we need to support our sisters, because sometimes we may be the one that needs it. And I've been in that situation as well. And sisters that have come, I would say, to my rescue and have stood out to say, hey, I see you. How can I help you? How can I support you? Can I take you to get a massage today?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
We don't seem to have the freedom to fail. One thing goes wrong and that's it, you're done. And then the rest of us are like, look, we barely in the club anyway. We're not sure we can afford to remain associated with that taint, right? So that fear of not having as much rope, right, to hang on to. Tiffany, I think it looked like you were getting ready to say something. Uh-oh, you turned off your camera. There you go.
I just hit something. I was thinking back in my early 30s, and your question was around our blackness as a woman, and I was in a presentation. I started off in commercial real estate, industrial real estate, so there were hardly any women, and there was definitely no black women. And I was actually making a presentation to someone, and a group of maybe 10, 15 people, and one of the partners actually changed the presentation from me presenting to them about kind of who we are and what we're doing to pretty much like an interview, trying to figure out how I got this job. Ooh. You know what I mean? He could not understand how I was there. It was palpable. His staff was even uncomfortable. So it became pretty combative. And I ended up leaving the meeting and going back to my boss, who was white, and saying, look, this is just what happened to me. And I've been a disruptor. I'm not going to take this. So what do we do? So my lesson was I ended up calling the person who brought us together. And he brought me and the man together. And I pretty much told him he was racist. I said, you put me in a, horrible position. And so if I was this white man sitting in front of me, what makes you think I don't have a qualification to do this? And why would you sit in front of me, with your team? So I made him, pretty much kind of own up to where he was. It was uncomfortable, but that was probably one of the first times very early in my career, there was so much, how do I say it? He was so uncomfortable with my space and my skin and where I was that I either had to, back down or confront it, and I confronted it. And from that moment on, I said, I will never allow anyone in the space that I'm in. I should have confronted it there in front of everyone, but didn't. I kind of went back. But from that point on, I called it what it was at the time that it was, when I experienced it again. So it was a huge lesson for me, to learn to be my authentic self in any situation. I'm not here to make you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I want to jump in there, and I want to use two pieces to reference what I'm going to talk about. One is Black women in nonprofits by a report by an organization called Race to Lead, and then the other is 12 Characteristics of White Supremacy by Tema Oken. And what I felt like was barriers for me was that I was treated like a workhorse. And then I was made to choose whether I wanted to be Black or be a woman. And I think So I think when we look at that and we say we're in these jobs, right? And so this became one of my soapboxes 2 years ago, because I started talking to my friends in government and corporate and nonprofit, wherever, and all the Black women had the same problem, was that they're in these jobs, they're being passed over for promotions, but they're doing 2 and 3 and 4 jobs. And then we're either going home stressed out, we crying it out, we drinking it out, we yelling it out. We're doing all of these things, but nobody's talking about that. And really, I've had a job where when I left, because I was working so hard and I was eating Rolaids for lunch, when I left, they hired 3 people. So again, as a Black woman, we got to know our worth. We got to know when to say no. And we got to know how to speak up for ourselves and advocate for ourselves, because nobody else is.
That's a hard truth. And so we've talked about, hold on one second. All right, there we go. My lovely daughters they just forget that, like I have a sign on the back of the computer that says, I got a webinar in progress, doesn't matter. The dog can't read, so she may interrupt us. But what's your if you had a piece of advice? Okay, so we know that these are situations that people face. Hopefully with this new awareness, right, there'll be a different response. People will think twice before they express things. They'll think about where that's coming from and through a racial lens, right? I think that people are claiming to be, and some sincerely trying to be more aware. What's your best advice, strategy? You face that at work. Someone wants to know, how the heck did you get this position? Or someone says, how come you're not friendlier with the white folks that work with you? Okay, so what's your strategy for, what's your best advice?
I think that, I think it is a very unique time that we're in. And I think regardless, we all know how we got this opportunity, right? It was senseless violence and brutality again. But we've all been given this opportunity. And so it's a time to pivot. And so I think, and this question is, this is somewhat personal, right? Because within your own organizations, the ecosystem that you're in, and what you can do and what you can't do, and what's going to jeopardize your role or your position. But I do think that it's given us a unique opportunity to have some conversations. And, and just as an example, I mentioned earlier that you sort of become the de facto expert, right? So I have had people reach out to me, and I have sincerely appreciated that, because I do think that it was coming from a place of innocence and ignorance. People wanted to know and were not afraid to ask. And so if you're going to ask me, I'm going to tell you. And I've done that. And it's sort of been a no holds barred, right? Because I feel like the situation requires, truth. So I think it starts with conversation. Some of it is action. Some of it is, what we're going to watch and see you do. The leaders who are standing up and who are making these statements, and, is there going to be any traction behind these statements? Will it disappear in 90 days when there's another news headline? So I'm seizing the opportunity wherever that opportunity presents itself. And that could be in the workplace. Again, it's in my neighborhood, at church. Sometimes I live in the suburbs, and sometimes out here we go to a non-denominational church, which is 98.9% Caucasian. But people stop us. You want to ask a question? You want to invite us for coffee? Oh yeah, you ask, we're going to tell you. We're going to take advantage of the pivot.
And to that, I would add that if leaders stop leading, a problem won't fix itself. And what I see in that is sometimes as Black women in leadership, we need a coach, because there are things like Tiffany was mentioning. You know, she was in a situation in the workplace. She said, I didn't say something in the moment, but I went back to that person individually. And these are the snap choices that you need to be able to make in the moment. And in the moment, sometimes you are just so shocked that it even happened that you freeze. You know, so I've had that happen to me. But what's been helpful, and I've been blessed in this, for the past 12 years, I've actually had an executive coach / life coach. And each time I've selected a person that's looked like me, so a brown woman, and in both instances I've had two, and they've both been Christian as well. So when I get into those moments where I'm like, because sometimes you're like, I'm like, am I crazy, or is it everybody else, or what in the heck is going on? And you can't share that with your staff, with a direct report, with your boss. So sometimes you just feel so isolated. So in having a coach, it has really helped me to stand upright and, you know, sometimes even push myself, because there's someone else tapping me on the shoulder that doesn't actually work in my workplace. I've been fortunate that when I say yes to a job, at the time I say, I have a coach. Would you be willing to support that monthly? You know, and that's, you know, that's when you do all your asking, when they're loving you, when you get there. So I found that to be helpful, because I don't have all the answers every day, but I found that a coach has helped me stand up as well as accelerate my career track.
That's fascinating. I don't think that many people think about that. First of all, how do you budget it? So I love the advice, you know, let the company pay for it. And as we talk about, you know, the work that UCAN does, right, which is very grassroots, and we also need to look at the treetops. I think I asked each of you, are you on any of those big corporate boards where they pay people really well and they help to influence culture at the, you know, in the Fortune 500, 100 companies? The absence of African Americans in that treetop space, right? And they'll say, well, we don't know anybody, or we don't know nobody's ready. So, you know, how do you get people ready? How do you help people be successful? What kind of coaching do you need? I think it needs to be from both ends, right? You have to, it will never catch up in generational wealth by just starting, you know, a bunch of successful small businesses. We have to somehow break into that stratosphere. You said to Giselle, and I want to see what everybody else thinks about this, that there's a difference between having a mentor at work and a sponsor at work. Does anybody else, has anyone had either? and how do you describe, first of all, what it's done? And
yeah, I'll take a go at that. I have multiple sponsors in my life. They tend to be older Black women who kind of been there, done that, that are seasoned in their careers or retired, that I can go cry on their shoulders, and they can provide me with some feedback and a little bit of a back rub. Because I think, and mentors are okay too, but I think the difference between the two, and I want to state it so that young people know, is that mentors kind of sit around and they tell you what you should be doing. A sponsor may do some of that, but they're the ones that are going to pick up the phone and open up doors of opportunity for you and tell people, hey, this person, they're going to vouch for your success, and they're going to put their reputation on the line for you. And so we need to understand the dynamics between those two, because a lot of times in many of our work environments, we don't have very many people in our immediate organizational circle that will vow for you, that will put their reputation on the line for you. And so sometimes we have to go outside our own organizations to be able to do that. And if that's the case, then what I was talking to Claude about last week is if we see the gap, then how do we deal with it inside of our own organizations and create these sponsorship, mentorship roles and relationships with younger leaders, because we have to figure out how to provide that path forward.
This is an interesting conversation, because honestly, question, I did not, like my mentor, honestly, going through like say my first, until I was 40, which they were a lot of white men and my parents. If that makes sense. My father and my mother. So it was my father and mother. And in this business community I had these people, men that I worked with and worked for and had access to that connected me, if that makes sense. But it was my father and my mother too, that were my mentors, who I saw work hard, who gave me advice. So I would even say my father and mom from the beginning. And then going into commercial real estate, my sponsor slash mentor, and some of you all know, I worked with Andy Zopp since 2013, Andrea Zopp, who's at World Business Chicago now. And that's where I just left in March. And she became the first Black woman that was ever my boss, the first woman, okay? So 6 years ago, I was 46, isn't that crazy? First time I had a woman boss, and she was African-American. So she has become both for me. You know what I mean? That person, I still, because coming into this environment as a CEO of this nonprofit now, I don't have a person, you know, at Chicago United. They're wonderful people. They get it. I am just who I am when I come in there with them. But I'll tell y'all, I will pick up the phone in a minute and be like, the hell with Andy, you know, like, and she still coaches me, but she will pick up the phone. When I was looking at this job, she was the first to pick up the phone. So she has done both for me. And that has been very unique. So, and then what I try to do as a mentor, and I've done it, you know, as long as I could, is guide, you know, African-American women specifically, and some Latinas, actually. There are a couple of Latinx, you know, women that worked with me over the last couple of years that are younger that I have mentored, but mostly through Impact Leadership Program, I was a mentor, and then just other, you know, Black women that I've come across in the last, say, 15 years. It's very important to me to give back and help guide, because we usually don't have that, right? And I can only speak from my experience, and I'm brutal with it, you know, what works and what worked for me. Doesn't mean it'll work for you, but I'm there to guide as much as I can. So I believe in both, but I did not have, you know, until this time, the executive sponsor and mentor until Andy.
That's so interesting. You talk about having a sponsor or a mentor, and then you talk about being a sponsor and a mentor, and like
it's very important.
Yeah,
it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robin, can I just want to add something here. When you started by asking like what's the difference, right? And for that sponsor, if that's the person who's going in the room, and they're going to advocate that you should get the opportunity, right? When the conversation even starts, that there is an opportunity, they're the person that's going to advocate and bring your name up, right? The mentor is who's going to help you prepare when the opportunity arises. Now, in one of my corporate gigs, I was seeking out a mentor, and I was hell-bent on having an African-American senior woman. And I was looking around the organization, no luck. And finally, African-American guy in the learning and development area said, why is it so important to you to have an African-American woman? Well, I had a long list of reasons. And he said, oh, that's great, but let me suggest to you that you might consider a mentor or sponsor from the predominant environment in this organization. And I was a little puzzled at first. And I said, well, and he said, well, the predominant, you know, here is white men. And when he said that, it really sort of blew my mind, because I'm thinking, well, yeah, they know a lot of stuff that perhaps even the Black women senior leaders haven't been afforded to know. And so I sort of pivoted a little bit and sought out a white male, and was fortunate enough to be paired with a really, really senior guy, you know, who took a liking to me, and who from that point forward until his retirement was able to advocate for me. And after his retirement, you know, I totally lost that. But I hadn't even considered it until he said, you know, you think about somebody from the predominant culture in the organization that you're in. That's all I wanted to add.
That is interesting. But also the fact that your company was create a framework for those kinds of things to happen. So sometimes you're at places where it's not even in the corporate consciousness. I would argue that today, unless wherever you work is completely deaf, dumb, and blind, it should be part of the corporate consciousness. But you know, we don't see everything that happens every place. I would like to, I want you guys to know that online, there's been a lot of talk about how, working ourselves to the bone. Kim's comments about, going home, overworked, tired, mad, drinking, thinking, kicking the dog, whatever it might be. And people don't ask men very frequently about their work-life balance, right? So I find it to be kind of an unfair question, except I think instead of not asking women that question, we should ask everybody that question, right? Now that we're more mindful about, being a whole and sane person. How do you ever feel like you were out of balance, that it took 100% of you to, achieve your career goals, and therefore the other part of you that you weren't focusing on suffered? And what have you done to mitigate that? And what would you advise other women to do to not let that happen?
I feel like that every day.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that every freaking day. So there's no such thing, and my mother tells me this, there's no such thing as, I know we've heard lean in and all this other stuff. It's never 50-50. It's never 50-50, so it's never gonna be. And there are times when you're focused on your career and you're gonna be all in, and I have one child, and he's 12, we have one child, and you're gonna maybe miss something or not connect something or not be there for something. And then sometimes you're all in with that child. And at different spaces, times in my seasons in my life, I've been, 60-40, 75-35. I just think that it is, I don't think it's a false, it's just a false, it's just not, it can't happen. This is for me. And so if you go in knowing that and you're just doing your best that you can every day, being present, kind of with where you are at that time, that's what I practice doing, because you're going to fall short in some kind of way. And there's lots of guilt around it, and I just don't think it's something where you can say, it's always going to be even. I just don't think that. And then going in with work-life balance, and you're striving to be someone who does want to work and you have a mission, you feel purposeful. I think for me too, what pushes me is my son sees that, right? And so for me, at the end of the day, when he's gone off, for me, I need to have something that I can still kind of connect to and be purposeful about in my life. And that's kind of how I lead with it, and it's hard. It's just hard, and you have to forgive yourself like every day, because it's not perfect. And so for an overachiever, right, or for a type A, which I feel like we all are, I just have to every day just be okay where I am. I don't know if that's helpful, but there's no formula.
Forgive yourself, especially. That's very helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful. Forgiving yourself is huge. And I think one of the things when we're juggling many balls, wearing many hats, both at work, in home, and at community, right? I think that we're all doing all of those things, that sometimes we become anxious and overwhelmed. And so when I feel myself having that anxious, overwhelmed feeling, I sit down and get quiet, get still, and I start praying. And that's the only way that I'm able to rise above that anxiousness and continue to go to work.
Wow. Anybody else feel like that balance was tough?
Yeah, balance is hard. And over the years, I've missed some friends. I've missed some conversations with friends. I feel bad when I get the call that, man, I haven't heard from you. And it's hard, especially hard for my friends who sort of not in the type of role I'm in, which is so demanding all the time. And it's hard to explain, because they're in other walks of life, and like they don't understand, how the job can, like, hold on to you like that. So I've missed that. And and the other thing, what it'll do to you, the stress that Kimberly's talking about, that stress can manifest itself physically.
Yeah.
So raise your hand if you've been to the doctor and they can't find out what's wrong with you. Okay. So, and given all kinds of tests, I'm complaining about this, I'm complaining about that. My back hurts, my head hurts, my stomach hurts, surely something is wrong with me. And, and I've had doctors say to me, it was so vivid. I remember it like it was yesterday. Doctor said to me years ago, you do know stress can kill you. And it's sort of like it was a level set for me. And in his office, I was a little upset. That's what you got for me after all. And on the drive home, I was like, wait a minute, stress can kill. And so I taking a look, we have to find ways to take care of ourselves. A mental health day is paramount, even when things are going good, let alone in times right now that are like, very, very stressful. And whatever that mental health day is, for some people it's getting their hair done, mani-pedi, goat yoga, flea market, I don't care what it is, but you have to make that appointment with yourself and you got to keep it.
Yeah. I'd like to just fourth that emotion of the panelists here and raise my hand to say, I actually ended up seeing a cardiologist because I was having an accelerated heart rate and after, all the tests, all the different types of heart tests, they're like, well, you don't see anything. Are you stressed out at work? Am I stressed out at work? And the last job I had, I'm embarrassed to say it, but I want to say it because I think my mother's on here, so she already knows. But I would wake up every day and I would say, God, please do not let me have a heart attack or a stroke today, because that is one of the prevalent killers of people of color. And I was at the point, I was working like 16-hour days, and talk about extracurricular activities. When am I doing that? Like 11 o'clock at night, midnight, I committed to it. I'm trying to get it done, and I just ran myself, into the ground. But who's guilty? I am, right? Because I shouldn't allow that. But I just think it's how I've been wired. I mean, I grew up with my mother telling me, hey, you're brown. You're going to have to work 10 times as hard, and you're going to maybe, if you're lucky, get half the rewards. So I always feel that I am, climbing a steep hill. And I think in giving all that I have to work, that my personal life, I'll admit, has probably suffered because I'm still single, never been married, never have had children. Matter of fact, at ULIC, UCAN now, I actually took the foster parenting course. And at my last 3 hours, I got nervous and I got scared and I never finished it. So there are just some personal things that I have not checked the box on. And sometimes I just have to say to myself, just to not make myself cry, I say, you know what? I woke up one day and I realized I forgot to have children. So
it's
tough.
You guys talk, we started out with forgive yourself, right? Do we ever say, you know what? If I don't work these next 4 hours on top of my 8 hours, project X is not going to get done. And that's too bad. We don't ever think of that as an option, right? We can miss the soccer game. We can miss the making dinner. We can miss, the parent-teacher conference. But do we miss a deadline at work, or can we? I mean, I've spent 30 years with deadlines that if I wasn't sitting in that chair at 9 o'clock, it was going to look real funny, right? So, but there was, a lot of prep to that. It wasn't just then. So it didn't seem like an option. And I think sometimes that makes us why we sometimes think we have to choose. Either do this wholeheartedly or do that wholeheartedly, but not do both. I would argue that the structure needs to change. Otherwise, they're going to lose a lot of talent. And we're not going to move anywhere. So we have joining us now, Deirdre Drake. How are you, Deirdre? I know, see, when you got really busy women, sometimes, you know, other stuff comes up that, you know, we thought they were going to be here at 10, and that's fine. We are happy to have you.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Robin.
Okay, so we've been talking about some personal, some corporate, some mission-driven things, and I did start out with a check-in. And I think I feel like if you race from one thing to another to get here, the first check-in I'd like from you is, you know, give me one word to describe how you're feeling right now coming into this meeting. And then one thing about yourself that we might not guess by looking at you.
Grateful is how I'm feeling right now. And it stems in general, my gratitude, but actually I just got off of a call that had to do with our diversity and inclusion efforts at my company. And one of the participants in that call, my CEO is getting retired. And so people were just expressing their gratitude for his leaning in and participating in some of the work. And one of the participants in the call also just drew attention to the work that we've been doing, trying hard to be vigilant about having women in leadership positions, and particularly women of color in leadership positions. And someone that I wouldn't have expected to notice that spoke up during the call and just wanted to make sure that they knew they saw what we were trying to do. So very grateful for that. And then the second part of the question, what did you, what was
Just by looking at you, what might I not guess about you?
That's a good question. You wouldn't know that I have an 18-year-old niece that is living with me right now. She started living with me in the fall of this year. I'm single and I don't have any kids, and hopefully soon I'll have her on her way, and I'll be back to that. But
by looking at you, you look perfectly sane. All right, so I could not guess that. And just to refresh, my two grown daughters just left out of here going to the march. Nice. You know, I've spent way too much time with my adult children during this pandemic. But I just want to refresh everyone's memory that Deirdre is an executive VP and the Chief Human Resources Officer for US Cellular. And she works with a lot of CEOs. And I'm going to just take a wild guess that most of them are white males, right? So what's that been like? And has it changed in the last 2 weeks? Wait, unmute. You have to unmute.
It's been my life. I mean, I've been very blessed in that I've been in the executive ranks, and my entire career has been in human resources, and I've been an executive since about 1999. So I've spent a lot of years in kind of senior leadership positions where I've had to try to influence kind of the broader group of senior leaders, and undoubtedly that the majority of that time has been mostly with white men and trying to get white men to understand. It's very interesting. My CEO that I've been with now for the last 6 years, who's retiring effective July 1st, we just had we do a series of conversations around ability to lean into things like race, gender, politics, things like that at US Cellular. And he knows they go on, but he hasn't typically, he might see that they're going on. And today we had one of those conversations. We had a woman named Mary Frances Winters in to talk about race yesterday, and people were sharing their sentiments about their growing up and what impact their upbringing has had on how they're dealing with the situation. And he shared, and I was very shocked. So I think that the current environment and just the magnitude of both rural, suburban, and urban America coming together makes this such a seminal moment that I think people who normally would not have engaged find that this is an opportune time for them to engage, including some of the folks at my company and some of the white men in particular who would not have normally engaged. So it's been very refreshing to see.
Yeah, I'm gonna give out badges of honor for a willingness to be uncomfortable. I think that you know, we've avoided it, black and white, but certainly white. I mean, who was it that said it? Michelle Alexander said, on any given day, there are 1,000 things she'd rather be doing than discussing the racist underbelly of America. It's just not, you know, something that we, you know, all run to talk about. And then how do you do more than talk about it? how do you actually make change? We have our audience is like super engaged, and they're I hope we'll post this chat someplace, because they are offering their wisdom as well, which is the best that we can hope for, right? Because you guys are amazing, but we have an amazing audience too. And we were talking a little while ago, and while we have you, Deirdre, talking about at the treetops, right? So you've been at the executive level for 20 years. And we've talked, there's been a lot of talk about that glass ceiling, right? You know, you can get but so high. If we were to actually think about equity for Black people in this country, you know, going back generationally, we weren't around when the airlines were started. We weren't around when hotel chains were started, except that one hotel that probably would have become a chain had they not bombed it in Tulsa. So, so how do we ever catch up to that really high stratosphere of economic generational wealth? Are you on corporate boards, Deirdre?
I'm on not-for-profit boards. I haven't done any corporate boards yet. Typically, you know, when you're, because I'm engaged in the company I'm in as a holding company structure, so I engage with 2 boards already, so it just makes it almost impossible to do another public company board. But I tend to get involved with nonprofit philanthropy. I've worked with UCAN for a number of years, at some intervals with UCAN on one of their boards, and then I'm also on the board of the Chicago Public Library Foundation and of the American Red Cross here in Chicago. So trying to balance where I can the board contribution with this. It's hard, right? And what you talk about is very hard work, and the work of senior professionals in my space is really about putting in the infrastructure to hold people accountable to making the progress that we can toil away at doing and work toward. And if companies are doing the right things, they should have things that they can measure and progress that they can measure, and things that they can do to hold their leadership accountable. When you talk about, you know, senior leadership ranks improving, people who are in C-suite level positions. I'm going to add another little wrinkle to this discussion, just because it was timely based on a conversation I had yesterday. Yesterday with one of my closest friends, and she worked for a very large company, and that company has the ability where you can go in and look at their org charts and see who's reporting to people. So they have a pretty robust org chart system. And as she's an African-American executive, and as people have come to her and say, you know, what are we going to do to get Black people to hire more, get these leaders to hire more Black people? She challenged them, because when she looked out at their org charts, out of 24 senior executives of color that in a group of about 122, when she looked at their direct reports, they didn't have any Black people reporting to them either. So you don't put that mirror up there to somebody else if you're not having the courage to do what you need to do to make sure that you are contributing to the cause.
I was going to add, just, you know, the work, sorry, Robin, but just quickly, the work that Chicago United done, you know, like kind of going in 8 weeks in, right? So for me, it's been just kind of this place of discovery about what's working and what's not. You know, we talk about those 3 areas, right? Increasing minorities on corporate boards, increasing minorities in senior leadership, and then MBEs and working with minority businesses and expanding them, because they are the ones that have more employment. They employ more people of color than anyone, right? So as I've looked in and kind of as we're going through this transition, you know, yes, there's the business leaders of color, for instance, that has been around for a few years, and the role of them, that you know, BLC is to put more people of color in roles. But one of the ways that I want to challenge our board is to really look at, you know, there's this great book, over 300 people that have been a part of, you know, BLC have been put on corporate boards. I want us to go further in actually, you know, putting them, for instance, in front of more nominating committees. You know, it's kind of like the Rooney Rule in, you know, which still needs, if you saw the NFL draft, you all, that's a whole other thing, but it is something where you have to have at least 3 in the nominating committees. I sit on a few nonprofit boards as well, right? And so I chair the governance committee for one of the boards. And when you're on a board as a person of color too, you can help that board set the guidelines for people coming in, you know, what the candidates look like. And what I want our businesses that are members to do is, it's not just good enough to have this book that says, here's all of these wonderful candidates are completely qualified, because I feel like we should be able to move the needle more. I want us to get to that place where, and that we're looking at, there, for every 1 or 2 candidates, we're still looking at this. In front of that nominating governance committee, you all have to have a couple of candidates. Like that's just like a no-brainer. And so we want to get to that place. That's, when I talk about disrupting, it's easy to just kind of, here's this, that's great, we've had some movement. We need some more movement. And I think, you guys start hearing about these statements with all of these companies, and that's all well and fine. For me, with the membership we have, it is taking it to another level. We hear about targets, right? And performance metrics. And it is not just about checking a box, but it is about truly, in a couple of years, this is where you should be. And companies are having problems, honestly, with showing you their results, because a lot of them know that their results aren't what they should be, and they where they're not. So this is not, I don't want to have Chicago to be a place of shame at this point, because that's not what we're here for. At this point, we have to give people grace. You know what I mean? Like, I could shave you, I could give you numbers, and that's not doing us any justice now. But when we're talking about African-American people on your boards and your executive management, how can we help you? How can we help you, as this organization has been around for 52 years, be accountable? That is like the space that we're on. And being accountable is more than just an anecdote or a book. It is actually having targets. And that is where we're moving Chicago United to.
And I think that's a really good point to make, because there's research out there that suggests, whether it's at the board or at an employment position, if there's only one diverse candidate in the pool, they're not getting the job.
Yeah. So the other thing that research shows is that if you have a more diverse board, you're a more successful company.
Right. Right.
I mean,
the bottom line.
You won't do anything even in your own interest, because you have other relationships that have not looked at your board membership through the lens of both equity as well. And if not that, then how about the bottom line? I know John.
We have metrics and goals for everything else in companies, right? So when you make it that it's a part of that, it's a part, because it helps with your bottom line. It changes this sounds like this is not rocket science, right? But it changes the narrative around it. So I think this is an opportune time for us to push. When I said disrupt, to push a bit more, around that, but not shame, right? We're in this space of grace. So how can we help you get to where you need to be?
Well, you might be in a space of grace. I'm going to tell you, some of these young people do not care anything about grace. They feel like they haven't received it. They're not given any. So you probably heard, I can't remember the woman's name, who did that very long diatribe about why we burned up y'all's stuff, because we don't own anything. We don't care about your target. We don't care about your whatever. It kind of explained the rage, right? So the lack of Black ownership at the very highest levels. If we could start with board membership, and I want to just, something that I've only recently learned, because I'm not a corporate person, is that, yes, you can be on a nonprofit board. That means you give. You can be on the board of a for-profit. That means you get. Okay. You have influence, but you are paid, right? So, and corporate culture has to shift from that top, right? So I think that we need to focus on that. I'm always boosting John Rogers' efforts to show corporations you are being foolish by not being diverse. And I think that people need to understand that it's a shutout. I mean, it's basically a shutout. So I'm sure they're happy for your grace, but I promise you, there's some shaming going on to help.
But it's also starting sooner than we are, right? So we talk about middle management, we talk about board level, but when you're really trying to impact poverty and wealth in these communities, you have to create a pipeline that's deeper than the one that we have been. Do you know what I mean? So there's a whole piece of that. So those young people can feel like they're included on the continuum, right? So that's a whole other strategy you have to include, so they don't feel left out as well. So that's it's more actionable, right? They're tired of talking. I get it. So what are we gonna do?
And I think, Robin, that the young lady that you referenced, and I think she's younger than us. I think that's safe to say. If you really listen to the words that she was saying, because she was really articulate using the monopoly analogy. With the 400-year head start, I didn't, let you get on
board.
You know,
No money,
you're not on
no
the board.
property. That's right.
No property, you're not on the board, no money, you know, none of that. And when you think about, though, that, and the question is being asked, you know, how can we catch up? Well, basic economics will tell you we will never catch up. What we have to ask for now, what we're asking for now is fairness now, opportunities now, equality now, stop killing us now, because we cannot make up for 400 years loss. It's not logical. And so there are so many opportunities. And I know we've been talking about the people and the people ascending the ranks, but when you think about minority business and the opportunity, and when you're thinking about, you know, procurement opportunities and where there is, you know, 24 companies that get invited to the RFI, and then it whittles down to 17 companies in the RFP. By the time you get to the e-sourcing event, there are 5 people and, you know, 5 suppliers, and the suppliers of color, oh, that's right, they've fallen out along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So even in that sphere, in that sphere of influence, because that's where you build economic wealth through entrepreneurship in our communities.
And
I
they're
think
only
that
tier
point about
2.
purchasing
And they're
power.
only tier 2. So
Yeah, that part of it, that's right.
So that's a
That's
whole
right.
other
That's
issue.
right.
But that point
a whole
about
nother
purchasing
issue.
power is an amazing point. But let me add an additional wrinkle that people need to be thinking about, that I discovered as I stood up a supplier diversity function at my company, is that we didn't have a policy about mandatory bidding. So people could just perpetually keep the same partnerships that they had without ever even considering other providers of service, as long as they were, you know, quote unquote, happy with the provider. And so we fought to put into place that every so often you got to put this out, and you got to include diverse suppliers, and you have to make it accessible to diverse suppliers. Those are the kinds of systemic things in the corporate structure that has to be just kind of chip that piece by piece.
We're running out of time. I want to, you know, we've had a lot of comments, direct questions on our chat I would have brought to you, but it's been mostly like, thank you. They thanked Giselle for her transparency. They talked about, you know, missing a deadline at work and staying up all night. And, you know, I mean, people are relating, you know, I can't say women only because I don't know who our audience is, right? It could be women and men. We hope they need to learn. But I'd like to as we all look at self-reflection and who's talking about what they're going to do and who's posting up, yeah, we believe Black Lives, I see more Black Lives Matter on businesses and things, or Black, you know, whatever, than ever before. It's that self-reflection when I, you know, look at who talks about it most often, it's media, right? So I wish somebody would look at some of that ownership and board and board representation, you know, besides just the people that you see on TV, because that's not the people that are making the decisions. But that's my soapbox. But I'd like to hear from all of you, each of you, as leanly as possible, in one word, if they can do it in one word, your leadership style, and if you're thinking at all about adjusting it a bit for the times. So my leadership style is very direct. And if I were going to adjust it, it would be to be more direct. All right. So I'm tired of coddling people, and, you know, to make them feel that always it'll be okay, because I don't know that it's going to be okay. I cannot ensure that. So I guess I might be approaching militancy.
Robin, my leadership style is collaborative, and I don't plan to change it.
Okay.
My leadership style is a little bit of both. I am extremely direct. I'm always ding done tone, as well as a coach, you know, and strategic. Like, it's like a 3-in-1, you know, at the end of the day.
Okay.
I would say mine is, in one word, resilient, because I just don't believe that there is anything that can't be done with the right focus, the right leader.
Resilient, like that. Deirdre?
I would say courageous. I've kind of prided myself on not being afraid to lean into some tougher things. I don't see that changing. If anything, to your point, Robin, it's going to get more intense as we navigate our way through this period.
Kim?
And I guess mine is more solution centered, so that we're not sitting in that woe is me gray space so long, but that we're really trying to figure out our path forward.
You guys, you all are amazing, and we do have 5 minutes left. And as one of our listeners or viewers has described what you've been saying, these are golden nuggets. And I've learned so much from all of you. If there's something that you live by, if there's a mantra that you use when it's like, when it's, what's to the wall, would you share it? Or if there's something that you could have done a little differently, the things might have, I hate that hindsight thing, right? I wish I had done that, but, kind of talk to your 21-year-old self. What would it be? What would you share? What would you want people to walk away this afternoon with?
I have 2 things. Leading with integrity at all times. Just when you wake up, so at the end of the day, it's just been mantra for me. Just lead with integrity, which is honesty and trust, right? And the other piece is, like for my 21-year-old self, is trust your instinct.
Ooh.
Which is like the Holy Spirit is what I call it in you. And we question a lot when we're in our 20s. If we sit still, and if I had trusted it a bit more, I think it would have made some difference in some ways.
To my 21-year-old self, I would say work on you harder than you'd work on anything else. And however you define that. I mean, for me, that's all about leaving a legacy. And I wish I would have started earlier doing that. I started a endowment in my name at Syracuse University, which is where I went to undergrad, to actually give scholarships annually to people of color. So that's kind of been the start of it. But I feel that I have left a lot of my hours at work. So I say to those out there, work harder on yourself than you work on anything else, whatever that means to you.
I'll just lean into that because mine would be similar. I've always quoted the words of an Erykah Badu song, and this is what I would have told my 21-year-old self. I work at pleasing me because I can't please you. So how do you continue to work on yourself?
I would tell my 21-year-old self, a dream deferred is not a dream denied. Sometimes you got to take the long route. And in terms of a mantra or what, helps me when things are crazy is, Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, and to give you a future.
Kim?
I was just going to say, find your spiritual self, find your spiritual voice. And anytime my back has been up against the wall, I just start praising him. And within moments, it moves.
All right. I'm muted instead of unmuting. Thank you so much. I could spend the rest of the afternoon with you guys. I know there's a lot of talk about what to do in this moment of time. Some of the solutions of old, do we boycott or do we pivot to hyper support? And so particularly for Black women, I'm pivoting to hyper support. Whatever it is you're doing, I'm going to do it with you. If you're selling it, I'm buying it. Okay. Whatever it is, I just feel like, there is this power in unity. And I appreciate UCAN for bringing us together, and everybody, the 100+ people on the Zoom, and however many people are on Facebook. I know they will post this later so that those who couldn't join today will be able to take advantage of it. So Kathy April Rush, Giselle Marcus, Tiffany Hamill-Johnson, Deirdre Drake, Kimberly Casey, we really appreciate everything you shared with us today. And hey, stay in touch.
Thank you.
No, please do.
Thank you.
So I'm going to.
Thank you.
You all are amazing. You really are. I feel like I don't need lunch. I don't need dinner. I got my food right here from you. So I'm going to turn it back over to the training coordinator at UCAN. And as you know, people that give, Kim, they give title to people at UCAN, but they do everything. All right. So, they just, okay, that's your title, but you're going to do whatever needs to be done. And they do it with passion and a heart for the work. So LaShondra Dandridge is going to give us our goodbye from UCAN. And I will see you all on the road to greatness. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just want to thank the panelists again. I mean, I really genuinely, truly enjoyed this. I know you were expecting to see LaShonda Denbridge, our training coordinator, but Zoom is doing what Zoom wants to do today. So here we are. But I have learned so much. And I mean, in terms of giving me something to aspire to, Giselle, I cannot ride a bike either. And I really don't understand why they won't allow us to ride on the sidewalks. Like for the bike riding impaired. So you and we're gonna do that. I just want you all to know that I was so excited when I saw who our panelists would be today. I've spent, I guess, a considerable amount of time LinkedIn stalking each of you. And I remember when Claude, we were talking about who should be on the panel. I was like, hey, Tiffany Hamill Johnson just became CEO of Chicago United. And I've been on her LinkedIn and I think she's kind of amazing. And Kathy April she's on our DAB board, but I've never gotten an opportunity to meet her, but her reputation precedes her. So, and then of course, Kim Casey is our own UCAN hero, and she just makes us so UCAN proud every day. And she comes by my desk and she's just so thoughtful and kind. And as a young professional, all of you mean so much. I don't know if you all have had an opportunity to look inside the chat, but the chat messages have been absolutely like the chat plus the panel discussion has been so amazing. So I thank you all so much. You are now part of a collective of Black women leadership brunch panelists that one day we're gonna have to do an all-stars because this has just been so great. So I hope that you all will come back. And like Robin said, once you become a part of the UCAN family, we don't quite leave you alone. So we will be in touch. And thank you all so much for watching. Have a great one. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you.
Thank you.